It's time to make some picks. And I know what you're thinking right about now. This guy's not even wearing pants. Yeah, you don't really have to worry about that, do you? Much like Valve when it comes to conflicts of interest, there's nothing to see here. Let's get into our Pickems. We've got to make some predictions for the major, the first major in 2 years. Let's hope that there's another one so I can do more of these videos. If not, at least this one was good, huh? Obviously, the first order of business is always to pick the team that goes 0-3. I've seen a lot of people being really down on Tai Lu. You know, I've seen a lot of people put Tai Lu over here, our Asian representation. I think that's complete bogus, though. I mean, the last time we saw an Asian team on the world stage of Counter-Strike, they almost 2-0 G2 Esports, the number 5 team in the whole world. So I'm pretty sure Tai Lu got their vision checked, and as a result, they can be pretty safe bets to at least get a game. Now, I know they're first up against Heroic. That should be a layup for the Danes. I still think Tai Lu will be able to score one game. I actually think they're a very dangerous pick to put 0-3, just because of the fact that they are dangerous. They are from another realm of Counter-Strike that has been sort of scrimming itself and co-evolving, sort of branching off. So there's some stuff that's going to be convergent, like, you know, maybe utility lineups and stuff, but their general way of playing, especially in a best of one, that is primed for upset material. Whereas somebody like Renegades, and to a lesser extent Sharks, these teams are a little bit more, you could say, EU focused with how they're prepping and the kinds of things that they're doing. So when you're going up against one of these teams and you're playing a similar style, I actually expect that the favorites would almost always defeat them, which is why I think it's really between Sharks and Renegades. Now, Renegades have access to more stuff theoretically because more of their players speak English, so yeah, maybe they can do more info pooling, or they can do some more scouting, or they can have things that are more effective. I would say probably Renegades are a little bit more established as far as the space goes in terms of an organization, so they probably have a little bit more going for them in terms of support staff and all of that. I'm not 100% sure that the Sharks are the ones to lose here. I saw Launders, shout out Launders, he did say Sharks have the second worst logo in this entire tournament. That's a reason to potentially put them in the 0-3 category. At the end of the day, I'm going to have to pick Renegades. I'm sorry to Monte Cristo's face that they used as a reference image for the logo, but at the end of the day, they were always, ever since they picked up that Greyhound lineup way back when 100 Thieves bought out the old Renegades lineup, this team has always just felt very underwhelming to me whenever I've seen them make any appearances. So just think about it this way, right? The Renegades themselves have been region locked in a way that really doesn't apply to the South American teams who have been able to cross-pollinate with some of the North American teams, or the South American teams that moved to the North American region. At the same time, we talked about Tai Lu and how they're not really in the running either for this, just because their style is that much weirder. The Renegades don't really have that. They don't have the good practice of the EU style, or the unique style and the unique way of playing that might give them, get them primed to upset. They really just need to rely on star frag potential and good play in general. And I don't really think you're going to get that at this tournament from this team. I think this team really is just, theoretically, would be primed to be replaced at some point if there were other Australian talent out there. Maybe some of the ex-Extremum lineup ends up taking some of their spots or something. But at this point, I'm just going to say Ixnay on the Aussie A, and we'll move on. Let's talk about the 3-0 pick. If you've been following these pick'ems for a while, you know that when you're making your 3-0 pick, you actually want a team that is a bit of a gamble, where if they pass but they go 3-1 or 3-2, you don't get points for them passing up to playoffs. You don't get points for them to, advancing to the next stage. So whenever you're picking 3-0 at any stage of the tournament, you got to remember that you want to pick that could go completely out, but could also theoretically go 3-0. For me, there's only one obvious pick for this, and it's Virtus Pro. The reason I pick VP is that they have just made this last-minute roster change. Ultimately, VP, without Sanji, we have no idea how they're going to play. They will sink or swim with the presence of Flit. And he's a seemingly really strong player. Obviously, Navi wanted him way back when, and Forza said, $3 million or whatever the fuck. And now they don't have them. So he's found his way onto a higher tier CIS roster. Finally, we can at least see him there. But they're essentially using the major, the first major in 2 years, as his little introduction to the world stage of tier 1 CS. I just don't know if that's really going to cut it. Either it will go super well, and he'll frag out in some best of ones, and then smash through the best of 3 with the help of Yakinder and Jame. Or they'll just wonder where all of their money went, and Sanji will be dropping ops in heaven. I think it's safe to say that betting on VP is flimsy right now. Not because the team themselves might end up be understrength or flimsy, it's just that we don't know enough. They're such an unknown quantity that VP make the biggest sense here. Now, I would love to say that, like Thorin and other people who have said, VP might be the dark horse to win the whole thing or get super deep. I'd love to be as confident, but I really can't be ultimately, because I keep thinking back to all of the sort of the style of VP was built around the idea that Jane would always have an op in his hand. I don't think that's going to be the case at this point. Flit is a player with really reasonable stats and a generally aggressive play style in the best of times. Either they've figured it out and it's going to work out splendidly, as mentioned, and in that case, my 3-0 pick will come true, or they'll get destroyed. I don't really see an even Stevens, we'll go middle of the pack 3-1, 3-2 situation for VP. So there you go. That's my pick. Now, we can get the boring stuff out of the way, so let me just go ahead and slot in all of the favorites, and then we can talk about some of the remainders. Okay, so I've put the favorites in, and really what we see here is Astralis, Heroic, FaZe, and MOUZ. Those are the only teams that I feel very comfortable saying can get out of this stage, considering the competition. Now, some people will criticize me for the lack of spirit, or maybe the lack of big, but realistically speaking, these are the teams that are, have land-proven players on them to some extent, or at the very least have been in hot form recently, right? And so obviously Heroic is the exception to the land-proven sentiment. But even they have played at some lands recently, and some of their team has played at lands in general throughout their career. So at this stage of the tournament, pressure really shouldn't be getting to any of the members of these teams. And it's also not really most of these players' first rodeos. And obviously, this is the first major for Brokey and some other players. So you can't paint with too broad of a brushstroke when you're making such analysis. But I think when you make the point that these teams know that they're the favorites and probably are mentally sound enough to not get completely domed by pressure, I feel like that's pretty easy to say about these teams. That's why I said that they're the boring ones. You can make some interesting points about how, Astralis have been together for a while, but they're not massively favorites because, they might not go flawlessly, right? I can't pick them as my 3-0 just because they're the team that's just shuffled up their lineup, and this 5-man lineup hasn't played before for this roster, especially at this level of competition. But that's kind of the thing, is that at this level of competition with some of the teams that you see here, I would not expect, most of the teams that Astralis are going to go up against to really put up much of a fight. The only rosters I'm concerned about Astralis facing off against are the other names in this list, and that's only going to account for one of the games that they need to either win or lose in order to either make it out or fall flat. So I think it's safe to say Astralis and Heroic go through. FaZe Clan have a ton of experience. I'm not worried about them whatsoever. Somehow, I seem to be one of the only analysts in the space that has faith in the FaZe project now that we've returned to something resembling a proper LAN. And hopefully I'm proven correct based on that. I just think it's unlikely that with the motivation of the young guns that are hungry, plus, Olaf Meister saying to Kerrigan, or in the presence of Kerrigan in an interview, it's time to get him, his major, obviously referring to the in-game leader who still has not had a major. That's the kind of thing, the camaraderie of this team, the fact that so many of them are proven on LAN, they're money on LAN, and they're very expensive players for sure. So you better get your money's worth on LAN. I think it's a foregone conclusion that they make it out of this stage. It would be very shocking if they didn't. mousesports, the only shocking thing about them is obviously their logo. I don't know why they've decided to go with some sort of nouveau, futuristic fucking Mickey Mouse hard edges, but that's what they've done. They've basically made a cutout and then given it stroke 50 pixels in Photoshop and called it a day. So I don't know, man. I'm not really sure what's going on there. But the best thing that you can say about mousesports, especially now that they look like this, is that Rops is still on the team. So he's probably enough to guarantee you a couple of maybe close wins against a number of these squads that they're going to be facing up against. I'm not worried in the slightest, and it should be pretty easy going from here on out. I actually would have picked Entropic to make it through this stage before the stupid roster shuffle that was aforementioned regarding VP fucked up the seeding and made it so that the round of one changes, like it changed who they were up against. But I also don't really rate Big that highly, so maybe Entropic will still make it out. At the end of the day, I'm fine underrating Big until they've actually proven something with Gade in the lineup. And realistically speaking, so far, they've only proven that they're just as inconsistent as ever, maybe a little bit more consistently bad than they have been before, but it's still very hit or miss for me. Gade has looked okay in the lineup, but that's the thing, is Big are a team that I'm finding it hard to place them in terms of where the org actually wants to be in Counter-Strike. They had a huge inflation in terms of their stock and the online era. Is that really worth anything now? Do we care about it? Does Big care about it? Like, yeah, they were #1 team for a weekend or something. I don't really see much of a value in this particular roster insofar as like comparing it to the other teams that have on paper worse rosters but have done way more. So this is the kind of lineup that I'm not really sure about. Plus, again, I mean, I say that Entropic look a little bit worse for wear now that they're going up against Big, but the other thing to think about is, oh, now that that's happened and it's only a few days out from the event, Big have much less time to prepare for a different opponent that might have way different things coming from the CIS region as Entropic are. I mean, they are way less, match ready, match proven than VP are. You can look at so many demos for VP. It's crazy. So Entropic, on the other hand, not really the same thing, right? So Entropic, I think, make an argument for themselves to make it through, just based on the fact that their main competition is going to be the likes of Big and those teams that probably should make it through, but won't and will be disappointments. So yeah, if you were making a tier list or whatever, and you were saying like which teams are going to bomb out or which teams are going to surprise and be bad, I would actually put Big on that list, along with potentially Team Spirit. We'll get to them in a moment. The other team that I think makes a really strong argument based on recent form, which may or may not carry over to the major, is ENCE, and I will pick them to advance, purely because of the fact that ENCE themselves have proven time and time again that they will get underestimated because they're this ragtag mix of players that surely shouldn't be able to do anything at Tier 1 Counter-Strike, and then they will use that to their advantage. Now, I don't really know if they've been particularly strong in specifically best of ones. Hopefully they've sort of workshopped that in this boot camp that they've, in the time leading up to the major itself. But I am pretty confident that they can make it through. And if I'm putting Entropic over ENCE in any capacity in terms of like just the fact that I picked them before I decided to move ENCE along the list, I have to pick ENCE just because of the same sort of reasons. People sleep on Entropic just because they're not very match proven. I mean, ENCE are much more match proven more recently. So I think, if anything, pressure might get to these guys because they're almost the favorites to leave the stage, to get out of the challenger stage in general. So that might offset some of the good things that you can say about them. We don't really know how some of these players will perform under pressure, but I think if Hades especially is going to fire on all cylinders, or even some of the cylinders that we know he's capable of, then this team really should be a lock because the other players seem to be money. So let's just go ahead and get our two more controversial picks perhaps out of the way. Entropic and ENCE, the two E's, they're going to get out of here. Now, my last team, realistically speaking, has to be one of either Team Spirit, Big, or Copenhagen Flames, because Movistar Riders and Pain Gaming, they're just very heavy underdogs. It would be very shocking if they made it out. I've already made an argument against Big, just that they haven't shown me anything. Team Spirit, they're kind of in a similar boat, but I don't think they have as much external pressure. The way that Big has a pressure inside the organization to try and make it out here, that's either going to make or break them. Team Spirit don't really have that to the same degree. They'll have their own personal thoughts of like, we should be a top team, especially from the CIS region, which is the best region of Counter-Strike currently, where most of the top teams come from, or the highest level teams, obviously Navi and Gambit, and to a lesser extent VP, who are a little bit more unproven now with this roster move. Team Spirit want to make a conversation for themselves, and the fact that I've picked Entropic and not Team Spirit yet, it is probably shocking to a lot of people, but I think Entropic have shown me way more recently, which is pretty surprising, perhaps. Now, Copenhagen Flames, very tempting to pick them, just because I feel like they could very much change the whole conversation here if they get off to a good start and win their early best of ones, which we've seen them be proven on in a LAN environment very recently with IEM Fall, which obviously is even a more recent tournament than some of these other teams have actually managed to make it through. I still think that betting against them is the safer play in terms of if you're just trying to be conservative and not necessarily going with what you think will happen or go with your gut or whatever. But I think this is the year of the upset. I think this is the year where there's been enough meta changes recently. There's been enough map pool changes. Ancient is still in the map pool. Pr0nogo, what the fuck? It's still in the map pool. And then on top of all of that, we've got these teams that have been region locked away from each other to some extent and have been co-evolving Counter-Strike at a professional level or semi-professional level, wherever they come from. And then now are bringing it to this world stage. That's why I voted Tyloo to not go 0-3, right? Because of their style being so different and because this being best of ones to initially qualify. So obviously it's going to be a best of 3 to either be eliminated or to make it in. At that point, you have to wonder what's going to happen to Copenhagen Flames, but I'm picking them. So there you go. Those are my pickems. Yes, they look very different than most people's, but I explained all of them. So unless you think you can defeat me on my own channel in the comment section below in terms of how I've presented my reasoning, well, I think you're just going to have to suck it up and copy my homework. Just maybe change 1 or 2 things around to make sure that people know you didn't necessarily get it from me. Oh, and you may have noticed the Get Pass Now button at the bottom. Yeah, I'm not going to spend money on microtransactions. I'm not an idiot. So, yeah, I'm not even going to be able to do anything with this. But I did get your video click, so thanks. Oh, yeah. Got to take my shirt off.